Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are attending this conversation with us today. We welcome you at Refugees International. Discussions for today focused on refugee meaningful inclusion in the context of World Development Report, and also in particular, but also on the World Bank in general. I'm Hurriyet Tafish. I'm a program manager at Refugees International. For the Refugee Leadership Program, I will be moderating today's discussion. Our discussion today would be very fruitful. We will start with a short introductions by Marta Guerrero, who is an advocate at Refugees International, followed by a shorter presentation by Xavier De Vicker, the co-director for the World Development Report, who will give us a short overview about the WDR and refugees' participation in the process that led to the preparation of the WDR. Then Xavier would join a group of amazing refugee leaders and experts from all over the world for a panel discussion. We will have Ana Maria Diaz, who is a fellow at Refugees International and a president for the Coalición por Venezuela, and we'll have calling us from Spain. And secondly, Nayan Dog, which we hoped she would be, actually she's here because she had certain connection issues, who is also be representing the Global Refugee Network. And she is also a resettlement case management at Keys Job Center from Canada. And also we have Yunus Mohammadi, who is a co-founder and director of the Greek Forum of Refugees calling in from Greece. And now I will, without further ado, I will pass it to Marta for her short introduction. Floor is yours, Marta.
Thank you, Jorge, for the introduction and the presentation. My name is Marta Guerrero. I'm the advocate for the Labor Market Access Initiative. And I want to talk today about the importance of the World Development Report and the inclusion of refugee participation in these spaces. Without a doubt, forced displacement is one of the major challenges of our time. Today, more than 110 million have been forcibly displaced around the world, including almost 30 million refugees. Yet, contrary to popular opinion, most refugees are seeking protection in low and middle income countries. In fact, more than 85% of refugees are hosted in developing nations that face development issues of their own. In most host nations, asylum seekers, refugees, and other forcibly displaced individuals face significant constraints that limit their ability to exercise their rights and undermine their well-being. To name some examples, in many host nations, refugees do not have access to work or freedom of mobility. And in most host nations, refugees face significant barriers to be included in host country systems. As a result, refugees are pushed to the sidelines of society, pushed into a cycle of poverty and aid dependency that affects the well-being of their families and their societies. Their vulnerability is heightened by their displacement and the prevalence of non-inclusive policies that have systematically left refugees behind. Adding to the situation is the fact that in developing countries where most refugees live, the host population also experiences high levels of poverty and marginalization. Despite this reality, the humanitarian response continues to be steadily underfunded at around 50%. In a global dynamic context full of instability and uncertainty, one thing remains clear. The humanitarian assistance is not enough to cover for the growing needs of refugees and their host. The international system response to displacement is increasingly overburdened. Plus, its focus on basic needs and maintenance leaves little opportunity for refugee self-reliance, threatening the long-term sustainability of the response. Typically, forced displacement is addressed as a humanitarian concern, but it is also a development challenge. The New York Declaration and the Global Compact for Refugees acknowledge the need for a new paradigm that bridges humanitarian and development responses in the way we respond to refugee situations, paving the way for the creation of a range of new mechanisms and approaches to forced displacement, including the involvement of new actors such as multilateral development banks. This is because mobility its drivers and impacts are closely linked to development assistance. And as such, development institutions like the World Bank are increasingly engaging in responding to forced displacement situations from a development perspective, bridging the humanitarian and development gap. Addressing forced displacement is also key in ensuring the accomplishment of the Sustainable Development Goals and is essential to the World Bank twin goals of reducing poverty and boosting shared prosperity. The World Bank has already led important efforts to support refugee situations, particularly through the creation of 2 dedicated financing mechanisms, IDA's window for host communities and refugees, and the Global Concessional Financing Facility. The bank also provides technical and financial support to host governments and aligns the refugee response to development outcomes and policy reforms. The impact has been significant. The institution was instrumental in promoting policy changes in countries like Kenya, where the World Bank funding incentivized the implementation of a framework to promote self-reliance among refugees. The role complements humanitarian efforts and has the potential to increase the overall sustainability of the refugee response. With the publication of the World Development Report 2023, Migrants, Refugees, and Societies, the World Bank acknowledges the importance of addressing forced displacement as a development strategy. The report is essential to shifting the way host countries perceive refugees from a burden to an opportunity for change. In fact, it provides a message of hope that forced displacement can be managed in a way that is beneficial to all. As development institutions like the World Bank continue to engage in forced displacement contexts, there remains one missing piece to the puzzle, essential to ensuring the success of any initiative and policy targeted at responding to forced displacement situations: meaningful refugee participation. In fact, the World Development Report acknowledges that success also lies in ensuring that migrants and refugee voices are heard. The report calls for the development of systems to ensure representation and accountability. This is extremely important because only through the meaningful and systematic participation of refugees and refugee-led organizations, we can achieve sustained change that has a positive impact on the lives of refugees and their host communities. I am very happy that we are here today with the World Bank and refugee leaders representing organizations from all around the world to discuss ways in which we can foster and ensure sustained and meaningful refugee participation in decision-making processes that affect their lives and the lives of their families. Refugee-led organizations have historically taken a leadership role to support refugee communities from the ground up. In many contexts, RLOs also serve to connect grassroots organizations to decision makers, ensuring that refugees and their needs are heard and represented. I believe that this timely discussion will be central to fostering a more inclusive response that puts the voices of forcibly displaced individuals at the core of the global humanitarian and development response, improving conditions for all. I look forward to the discussion, and I thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. This was great. Thank you for the comprehensive introduction on that. I just want to also remind everyone that this event will be recorded, and the recording will be available on our website later. And also, we will have a short time for almost 10 minutes at the end of the webinar for the Q&A. Now I will pass it for Xavier for his short presentation on the WD.
Many thanks, William. Many thanks, Martha, and many thanks to Refugee Internationals for organizing this this session. My name is Xavier De Victor. I'm working at the World Bank. I've been working on refugee issues for several years, and most recently, I was one of the co-directors for this report on migration and forced displacement. Before going any further, though, I would like to highlight what we all know, that this is about people. This is about people who are living in difficult circumstances, and it's about trying to find ways to best support them. So while our conversation today may be a little bit abstract or theoretical, I just wanted to start with this recognition, and also with a message of humility on my side as I engage with so many of you who are, directly engaged with some of these groups in the day-to-day work. I think the question for us as international actors, as international organizations, is really how can we best support refugees, refugee-led organizations in a manner that can be beneficial to all, to the refugees themselves, to the hosting communities as well. And so in order to do this, at the bank, as Martha was recollecting, we've been trying to develop instruments, trying to develop approaches, trying to develop programs, but we also felt that now was a good time to try to take stock of it all and try to, in a way, set an agenda for the development community in the period ahead. And so we've been working on this report for a little while. I also would like to thank those of you with whom we've been able to consult throughout the process, which has been extensive, or which has been marked by extensive effort to reach out. Many thanks once again for Refugees International for their support in doing this. And just for the record, I also would like to thank colleagues at UNHCR for the support they provided us through this effort. So let me just say a few words on WDR, but then go straight to this question of meaningful participation. The report itself is available publicly. At the end, you will have a QR code that you may want to use to direct you to the website. Otherwise, just type WDR 2023 on Google and you'll probably find it. There are two key messages in the report. The first one is more related to economic migration, and it is to recognize and acknowledge that migration is going to be increasingly necessary for countries at all levels of income in the period to come. And you'll see some details if you go to the report itself. The second point is that we need to distinguish between distinct types of movements that have different impacts on hosting countries and that call for different policies from hosting countries. So this is what we call the match and motive matrix, which essentially looks at the skills people bring, the extent to which the skills are complementary to what exists in the hosting countries, therefore the extent to which refugees and migrants are actually in a position to contribute to the economy. Right, so essentially, their qualifications, their experiences are such that they can actually make a positive contribution in the labor market. Right? The other perspective, of course, is the perspective of international law, which clearly separates between refugees who are in need of international protection and economic migrants who are essentially seeking opportunities. And for refugees, the hosting countries have an obligation to host them. For economic migrants, as the destination countries, there's a prerogative to accept them or not on their territory. And so essentially what we've done, and I was saying that the second key message of the report is that there are different types of movement that call for different policy responses. And so what we've done is we've tried to use these two dimensions, the skills match, the matching of the skills people bring with the needs of the host society, and the motive of their movement, whether they move out of fear or whether they move because they're seeking opportunities, to essentially try to differentiate between four types of movement that each call for distinct policy responses. And I go very fast on this because that's obviously today not the main topic of our discussion. But essentially what we're saying is that when people bring skills that match the needs of the destination economy, then their movements can actually be very beneficial for this destination economy. And so therefore the question is, for policymakers, for government, the question is how to maximize the gains, right? There are gains because people can contribute in the labor force, they can bring skills that are needed, high skills and low skills, by the way. We're not only talking about the AI engineers and the neurosurgeons, and many countries also need plumbers, many countries need electricians, Many countries also need people to serve in the grocery store, etc., right? So what we're saying is, when people bring skills that are in demand, there are benefits. The question for government is how to maximize these benefits. But as we all know, in many refugee situations, we are also facing people, or the situation of people who are moving to the first place that they can reach safely, regardless of whether their skills will be in demand. And therefore, sometimes we have this mismatch. And in the case of refugees, that raises issues for hosting countries, because on the one hand, they have an obligation to host refugees. On the other hand, there may be a cost to hosting them. Therefore, the question is how to manage this cost. And from our perspective, it's really about two things. It's really about responsibility sharing on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's about trying to reduce these costs in a way, trying to provide international protection in as effective a manner as possible. Taking as a starting point the observation that many refugee situations last, that they are not only emergency crises, and that therefore apprehending them, managing them as emergency situations may not be the most effective way to do this. And then finally, we have the question of people who are not refugees, who are moving to seek opportunities, but who may not bring skills that are very much in demand. And the other question is, how can we reduce the need for such movements? But let me maybe just spend one more minute on the question of refugees, because that's obviously what we're here to discuss. And as you see, we have a series of recommendations, which you can read while I'm speaking, which essentially can be summarized by this red arrow that you see in the middle of the matrix, right? So fundamentally, the point that we're making is, how can we actually help people move to a place where they can actually most contribute to the hosting economy, to the hosting society. This is good for the hosting society. This is good for refugees. The interests are aligned. And from our perspective, it has to do with inclusion in the labor market. I think Martha was talking about it earlier. Inclusion in national systems, what we call national systems, education, health, and the like. And then what we call internal mobility, what our colleagues at UNHCR call freedom of movement, the ability to go to a place where there are jobs, right? And if we manage to do this, then essentially we transform a situation that may impose costs on the hosting society to a situation that can be beneficial to the hosting society. So with this in mind, and that's a little bit of the broader framework. I think, the added value of this framework as compared to some of the traditional policy conversation is really to look at it from an international legal perspective, protection needs, etc., which remain very valid, but to kind of combine this with a more economic perspective, which is about how we can actually help people be in a position where they can most contribute to the needs of the destination economy. Now, one of the things that we're saying as a report is very simple, which is that if when making policies, you take the same people in the same room to talk about the same thing, you're very unlikely to have a different conversation. Or in other words, that if we want to make different migration policies, different refugee policies, we need to make refugee policies differently. And we emphasize, as part of this, the importance of international cooperation, the importance of financing instruments, because, we're the World Bank, but we're also talking about the importance of what we call here, in a very bureaucratic term, inclusive decision-making, or what has been also called voice, which is, making sure that all parties that are directly affected by decisions are actually part to the conversation. Earlier in my career, I was serving in Poland, and some of my counterparts have this very cute expression, which is that in the international discussion, you can either be at the table or on the menu. And so I think the question is, how can we help refugees be not only on the menu, but also at the table? And as part of that, I wanted maybe just to share a few thoughts in terms of, that's my last slide. I wanted to share a few thoughts in terms of, what could be ways to ensure a meaningful participation of refugee-led organizations. But I would like also to start by saying that this is obviously one perspective coming from someone who has served in the development community for a number of years. So in a way, I'm putting it on the table as a way to stimulate our conversation today, not as a suggestion that this is all of it and all what's needed. Also, for the sake of this conversation and for making it, I guess, more lively and more stimulating, I also took the liberty to express myself maybe a little bit off the record, even though I realize that we are recorded, but just to share a perspective beyond the processes and instruments that the World Bank has developed to that effect. And so I guess my first, as you see, I have 4 points here, right? First suggestion is, let's be very focused, right? Why do we need participation? We need participation, in my mind, or in my experience, for 2 things. We need participation for policymakers and donors to have a better sense of what refugees really need, to get a down to earth confirmation of what the needs are in a sense of details. And then we also need participation to get a sense of whether what we're doing works. So both to inform design and then to kind of help adjust during implementation, right? So these are in a way the 2 elements where things can be most useful. I think the second point is, from a practitioner perspective, the difficulty when we engage with many civil society groups, refugee-led or non-refugee-led, is who exactly are these people speaking for? Who are they actually representing? And representing, in my mind, is a very loaded word because it does not only mean, I'm speaking from this perspective and here's what I have to say. It also means I've actually been tasked by people to be their voice, and I will actually have mechanisms to get back to them, to tell them what has been discussed and whether they felt that I represented their positions properly, right? And so I think the question is, and obviously it's very difficult for a number of organizations, right? But the question is, how stronger can we make this representation mechanism so that, we can engage most effectively. I think the third point is the question of being prepared, in the sense of being very clear about who are we talking to, which donor, which policymaker, how do they function, what are their processes, what are the sort of things that they can actually affect or they cannot. I remember a discussion a while back with some organizations who are essentially, expressing their frustrations about the situation in their country of origin and complaining about the fact that, the World Bank should do more to try to resolve some of the political deadlocks, right? And, I understand the frustration. The reality is always that the World Bank is not really the right organization to resolve political deadlocks, right? And so in a way, it may have been a missed opportunity for them to not push other parts of an agenda that would have been more relevant to us. The other point is, most of our organizations have fairly elaborate processes and procedures to engage. And so I think, understanding them, knowing them is also key to being able to influence at the best time. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight this question of sustaining the engagement and trying to transform it from a one-time thing to a process. And in this context, and I close here, this is where we very much appreciate also our partnership with Refugees International, because while it started as just a simple brief on a report, it has become a real partnership where we can engage over time, get to know each other, and therefore be much more effective at influencing one another. So let me maybe close here. Let me also encourage you to have a quick look at the reports. The executive summary, the overview is only 17 pages. And for those of you who don't have time, there's a 3-page key messages. Many, many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Xavier, for the presentation. And as we saw in the presentation, Xavier was mainly highlighting the importance of not only looking at refugees from the legal or protection aspect, but also to the importance of including refugees economically within the host country in a case that we create a win-win situation for the refugees themselves and migrants and the host community, because we're going to be kind of matching the needed skills of the host community with the migrants and refugee skills. And we also talked a bit more about the meaningful refugee participation within the WDR context, but this is what we're going to dig deeper. And now in our conversation with the panelists, during this part of the conversation, I'm gonna start with the first question to our panelists today. And the first question is, how would you define meaningful refugee participation? So we always hear about meaningful refugee participation, but I'm always worried that we have different things in mind that means to different people, right? So if we're gonna give a characteristic of what is meaningful refugee participation and also what is not meaningful refugee participation, and if you can give us example about based on your experience so far, where did you see there is a good example of meaningful refugee participation and what is not a good example of meaningful refugee participation? And here I'm gonna start with Anna.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much, Huri. I want to share a few comments about it, of how being meaningfully inclusive with our laws on refugee. And I want to do it with examples because I think it's the best way to show in practice how to meaningfully include refugees in decision making. First, at the level of our laws, a very good example is in the context of Latin America and the Caribbean region is the Quito process. This is an intergovernmental space created in 2018 with the initial participation of 11 countries to seek shared responses to the massive displacements of Venezuelans, which currently reaches 8 million people. So this is a space among governments. So the Quito process was a dialogue only between ambassadors and presidents, and since 2019, a Coalition for Venezuela, or Coalition for Venezuela, which is our law that I made part of, we began to advocate how to include, how important is to include our voices in this case. So have run a lot of water down the river, and right now it took some time, but right now we are one of the voices, the only two seats in the Quito process, which belongs to the civil society. So at the end, we are the ones who believe that this process, we have the experience, we have the immediate response, and we can be truly helpful in the planning and the integration in the medium and the long term. And they saw it. So currently, one of the two seats belongs to the civil society, to Coalition for Venezuela, as another law, not official yet, but it is recurrent. We are invited in every single technical meeting, and we make sure that in every single of these technical meetings, we are represented by a refugee leader with experience and in specific issues. For example, in the Costa Rica meeting, which was about family reunification, we were represented by our country coordinator, which is an amazing lawyer with great experience in family reunification. In the health session, we were represented by a fellow MD. So this is the way how the national commissions have solved the practical inclusion of our laws in this process. So the second example that I want to share, it's more in an individual way. I recently came back from Colombia in a field trip with my colleague Marta Guerrero, And one of the examples we saw was in the Medellin municipality. And Medellin is a city that a few years ago was submerged in massive violence with the gang wars, with the paramilitary groups, and it was even the most dangerous city in the world for several years. So in this context, the comunas, which are the highly vulnerable neighborhoods, have wounds that they are still healing, and they are advancing through development, but are in a very slow pace. So added to this process is the arrival of thousands of Venezuelans who are also highly vulnerable. So this adds tension to the community. So the natural thing to happen is to have conflict for the few resources, and the municipality found that a very effective way of inclusion and find practical solutions, is to include Venezuelan women leaders, forcibly displaced, with the local communal women leaders in the consultations and the making decision process. So we're talking about meaningful inclusion with a voice and a vote in the policies that the municipality, Medellin municipality, actually implement and that directly affect their lives. So what I aim to raise awareness in this is that both examples show something that is commonly ignored, and it is the fact that our lives did not begin when we cross a border. We are training people. We are many of us with higher education, with skills, and we can contribute to the solutions if we are truly and meaningfully included, listening, and be engaged in the decision-making process. And back to you, Huri, because I know many of the panelists have so much to tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. No, this was perfect, because now we are talking about not only including refugee or RLOs on just being on the table, but also having an impact on the decision making. So we have two parts of the meaningful inclusion: having a seat on the table, plus having an impact on the decision making, not just being on the table. And this is a great point. And we're talking about institutional level and individual level. Thank you very much, Anna. And I'm gonna move to Sekande. Sekande, what do you think, as I said, is the characteristic of meaningful refugee participation? And if you have any other example.
Thank you so much. I can give some characteristic of meaningful participation, as my colleague Anne-Marie said. We cannot talk about meaningful participation when we don't have people on the table, when we don't hear the voice. And it is not only about voices, it is also about decision-making. We cannot take decision on behalf of refugees without refugees. They should be there. And as others said, refugees, they are not only, they cannot be seen as victims. They have skills, they have competencies, they are doctors, they are engineers, they are in all sectors, and to involve them, will bring a win-win situation. If they are not using them, the communities are losing the potentiality or the resources they have which can help them. And it means that it is always better to think at the, I can say, bottom up, and also vice versa. It means that when refugees should be included, it's at the designing and implementing and also evaluation. They should be there. Another point is about power dynamics. I think it is better also that all the stakeholders should identify and change internal practices and take refugees as equal partners. And also in all steps, It means local, national, international, and all in all sectors. I can say that also refugees, most of refugees, they know that they are ready to stand tall for a promising, bright future. They are there. We are there. We are ready to act and to contribute to this world. It is our world. It is our community. And what they need also is finance. It is finance. You know that without fund, they cannot go far. And it is better also to finance, to take in consideration to put to have a viable fund for refugees and also refugee-led organization. What they cannot do, it is I can say that, yeah, people cannot see refugees as victims only. No, yes, they have been victims, but they cannot stand all life victim. They are ready to contribute, and they should be taken as not only beneficiary, but also as actors in the communities. I don't know if I can go ahead with some example. Yes.
I think you can one example, and then we have
yes,
to move to
just one example of involvement. We thank a lot the World Bank with this report. They thought to involve refugee-led organization. I know that our colleague Anila from Global Refugee-led Organization has been involved and active in this report. And this is a great example of to take and to follow and to keep for the future. Another story is about, I can give an example of Canada, where I live. We know that refugees have enough space. We have space, we have where to talk, we have where to make decision. We are there, we are on the table, we have, our voices are heard and taken in consideration. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So that was also great points when Anna talked about the institutional and individual representation, and then secondly, you have highlighted some characteristic of the intentions of why we're having refugee on the table, the way that the organization should look at refugees as a partner, not just you are doing them a favor, that, okay, you are on the table, so what do you want more, right? So it's not like about a favor, because those who are on the table are qualified to be on the table, as you said, because refugees comes with a lot of skills. We're not just talking about getting a random person on the table and say, okay, we're gonna have a participation here, and then take it as like, okay, they don't know what they're talking about. But we're talking more about having the right refugees on the right table. And this is when the participation would be more meaningful. And I will pass it now to Eunice. If you could give us a highlight of what is not a meaningful refugee participation, or an example of a negative refugee participation, that also would be perfect.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us and organizing these discussions. Thank you, Refugee International, for organizing these discussions with the World Bank. And before that, and I want to again emphasize on what colleagues said from different perspective. And I want to say that, yeah, when we speak about refugee participation and meaningful participation, it means that refugees should be considered as contributors, not just as beneficiaries, as colleagues said, as Secondary said, as beneficiaries or as receivers of help, but as contributors and as those who can find solutions, who can make solutions. I think this is the important, as people with the rights and obligation in the society. That is the issue. And coming to the what does not entail when we speak about refugee participation, it does not entail, when we speak about participation, it is not participation if you have just refugees and migrants just being at the panel as a shadow. It was happening for long times. I'm living in Europe for more than 22 years. So being inclusion, it doesn't mean that having a refugee and migrants in discussion just as a shadow, or just having refugee and migrants speaking about how difficult was their journey, or to come to include an event and just playing music or making food. Of course, these are very important for multiculturalism and all of things. But we should understand that inclusion means, and participation, meaningful participation means that refugees should include in decision-making process, which is the most important. And we have seen it in different level. And also I should mention here that there have been improvement in all level, of course, that from the, if we see what was happening before 20 years until now, and just itself that now the World Bank now it is looking to thinking of including refugees. I think it is something important, and there are really improvements. And you see an example of our organizations. That me also, I came as asylum seeker. I was sleeping in the park actually in Greece with my colleagues. We have organizations, and now many of our colleagues are as expert groups on views of migrants and refugees in European commissions. And we are happy that many of our refugees and migrants from different communities that they have been candidated for parliamentary election, European elections, or national elections. So these are, I think, the best examples of inclusion. It means that really being on the table, not just as MENO, being part of decision-making process. That is, I think, the most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Younes Mohammadi. I think, like, yeah, you have highlighted a very good points too when it comes, and I think that Sakandi have mentioned it before, when we're talking about having the refugee as part of the designing and the implementations and the planning and the evaluation as being part of the process, not just having them there on the side, or as I say, usually the spices at the end of the recipe that we have refugee participation here. Thank you very, very much, Mohammadi. Now, Xavier, because also we want to make sure that refugee participation is also meaningful for the bank itself or the institution that RLOs are dealing with. And in order to create a win-win situation, the participation of refugees should also be meaningful for the World Bank, or should be also meaningful for the future of WDR. So how do you think, or from your perspective, how refugee participation could be meaningful for the future of the WDR?
Many thanks, and many thanks to colleagues for sharing their experiences and perspectives. Let me maybe just make a few points. First, just to clarify one point, is that so WDR at the end of the day is a piece of paper or a piece of virtual paper. It's just a report, right? So in a way, there may be limited future of WDR. I think what's more important is the future of this agenda, as informed by WDR for the World Bank and for others, right? But I just wanted to avoid misunderstandings on this. I think in terms of what makes for a meaningful participation, I think we've heard colleagues highlight the fact that refugees have the ability to contribute. I think we've heard the fact that this contribution needs to be more than, excuse my bluntness, token representation around a table. You listen to everybody. You enter the room, you know what you want to do, you listen to everybody, and then you do it. Well, you do what you wanted to do anyway, right? So I think we all agree. I think we all agree on this. I think to me the question is, okay, so how, right? How do we actually move to the next level? And I think, from talking to a number of actors in government, in the development community, I think this notion that refugees are more than, or refugees may have been or victimized, actually, rather than victim, may have been victimized at some point in their life, but that, as I think Anna Maria was saying, their life didn't start the day they crossed the border. So I think this is actually by now, I think this is actually integrated in the discourse by many different people. I think the importance of participation, regardless of refugees or not, the importance of participation by communities, stakeholders, etc., is very much part not only of the discourse, but of the practice of at least development actors, right? And so, in a way, I guess what I'm trying to say is these battles have been won. Now, obviously, as any battle that's being won, you need to consolidate your gains. No question there, right? But I think the question is, having moved the line, having shifted the line there, then the question is, so what's next, right? And how to move forward. And there, in my mind, the challenge for many organizations is, what exactly, when we say, well, we need more than token participation, and I think we all agree on this. I think the question is, okay, but so what exactly can refugees influence, right? And what can the refugee-led organizations, influence, and what exactly can they influence most, right? Because they're not going to influence the selection of a contractor to build a school, right? There are processes for this, procurement, blah, 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 right? And they shouldn't, right? They're not going to influence, a number of project design things, or whether the law goes to the Senate before going to the chamber, or to this or that commission before, and so on and so forth, right? And they shouldn't, right? Because that's not where they can add value. So I think, to me, the question is, what is the actual what we say in economic terms, right? Comparative advantage of refugee-led organization. What is it that they can actually bring to the conversation that only they can bring to the conversation? And in my mind, at least for an organization like the World Bank, it's really two things. It's really gave a sense of, okay, this is a discourse, but in very practical terms, these are the actual needs of refugees, and these are the nuances around these needs. It's not only that our kids need to go to school, is that the school, it would be great if the school could be in this neighborhood, or it could be great if the school could actually include a language course, or it would be great if the school is right. So it's beyond the kind of stuff that we all agree on anyway. I think it's more to me, it's influencing the design of activities by saying, yeah, inclusion of Venezuelans in Colombia is great. Having a 10-year permit is fantastic. But you know what? You have to go to 3 different offices to get the work permit. Could we actually go to only 2 offices? Because that would actually make it much simpler for people, and therefore many more may actually participate, right? I'm taking this example, which is a fake example, right? Obviously, it is not the situation in Colombia, right? But just to clarify that, I think this is where your perspective can actually make a difference. And then in my mind, there's another one, which is, okay, well, you, World Bank, said that you are going to, through this project, to build whatever number of schools. It has been 3 years and we don't see half of them. So what's happening, right? So in a way, just to give feedback on how things are going because of your presence on the ground, etc. So in my mind, it's really about what's the comparative advantage? What are the few things that in a given context, because that's going to change by country, right? There's going to be variation. What are the comparative advantage? What are the things that you can influence that only you can influence? What others are anyway going to say, don't waste your saliva, right? Don't waste your time. Anyway, it's going to be said by someone else. And I think to me, the other point is an organization like the World Bank has very complicated and elaborate processes for consultations. And therefore, the question is, can one get familiar enough with these processes to figure out when exactly to talk to whom exactly about what exactly, right? Because there are times in the project cycle where you can have a huge influence, and there are times where as much as I'd like to change things, we're a bit too far for this to be simple. And so if what you want to change is fundamental, we may change it, but if it's just a detail, we're probably going to say, well, too bad, right? And so I think the point to me is to really understand these processes, and that's complicated because each and every of us has distinct and different processes, and they all tend to be extremely elaborate, which means extremely complicated. But I think it is worth thinking about it. I think we had an earlier discussion with Refugees International about how we can actually best support refugee-led organization in better understanding these processes, and therefore better understanding where to pinch and at what time to actually get the maximum effect of the pinch. I was going to say the maximum pain. Let me just say the maximum effect of the pinch.
Okay, thank you. So I see what you're saying, that for refugee participation to be meaningful, first RLOs should be well familiar about how the World Bank works, because we're not talking about a typical humanitarian organization. We're talking about a totally different type of organization with more financial and development focus. So RLOs should be familiar on how the bank's function and the particularities of the bank to be able to contribute to these particularities. And this is what Marta, my colleague at RI are trying to work with RLOs to make sure they have a well-rounded view of what is the actual particularities of the World Bank and how it works, and how can RLOs or refugee-led organization meaningfully participate with the World Bank. And we do understand that in the case of the World Bank, it is not a typical human, as I said, it's not any mechanism can do the work with the World Bank, that's for sure. And this is supposed to be our last question, and I know we're running behind of time, but I just wanna give, even if just 1 minute or two, to the participants to tell us to the panelists to tell us, what do you think a mechanism within the context of the World Bank for refugee participation could look like? I will start with Eunice. That's Secondi.
Am I right? I'm speaking. Yeah. Okay, do you hear me? I don't know. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, understanding that World Bank, it is not a humanitarian institutions. Of course, it is focusing on development rather than humanitarian development, and sustainability rather than humanitarian assistance. So I can mention some possibilities very practically that how refugee-led organizations or how communities can be included. For example, the first, I think it is a consultative process. It means that World Bank can establish consultative mechanisms that actively engage refugees in formulation and evaluations of development policies and programs. I think it is something that bank can do. And also partnership with refugee-led organizations, that one, I think that it is an important, good example of partnership of World Bank with Refugee International. And it can be improved with different other the refugee-led organizations that it can be done. Of course, it is economic inclusion, and also it is also knowledge sharing, actually. So when we speak about refugees have gone through the problems and issues either in country of origin and also in the host countries. So from the first hand, they know very well the issues and challenges. So they can share this challenge, and according to this challenge, of course, the World Bank can make decisions and ways for solutions, and not for as it's been done with other organizations. And for just to say some steps, that maybe some key steps that what I'm thinking that it will help. I think the first, which is important, is the commitment and willing that we can see already from the World Bank that there is a willing and commitment that they want to include migrants and refugees, because there is a problem in different institutions and states that there is no willing. So the mechanism doesn't work if there is no willing and commitments. And there should be a policy and a guideline development that I think that outline how refugee participation will be implemented within the institutions. I think it can be created also with cooperation together with this consultative process. And also, I think it is important also capacity development within the World Bank, I think, which is actually building the capacity of World Bank and World Bank staff, I think, in order to understand, because the cultural sensitivity, this participatory approach and all this process, I think it is important that to create some kind of training programs on refugee rights, on cultural sensitivity, and as I said, that it is important. And of course, as my colleague before said, I think it is resources and funding. It is very important that there should be allocating of funding to support the implementation of refugee participation mechanism or the participants itself. So that's also important. And of course, as we said, that it is monitoring and evaluation. Also, refugees should get involved in this process as well. Thank you. Sorry for the time.
I'm sorry that I have to cut you short, but I get your point, Yunus, and we see that we should start thinking and we should start having more of this roundtables conversation with the World Bank people to brainstorm how this would look like. And also we have to keep in mind that the World Bank deals with state clients, and if they don't approve something, it's not gonna happen. But also how can RLOs work with the World Bank to make sure that we might get to a point where we can impact the state decisions at certain point. I'm not sure how long we can go over time here, but if Anna or Seconde have a final thing to say regarding a mechanism to engage with the World Bank, the floor is yours. Just a minute or two, please.
Yes. I have just 2 quick points. One is internal to World Bank. If they can think to initiate a kind of internal change, which include, for example, recruiting policies, which is sensitive to refugee, and when they can have refugee also in leadership position, and also initiate a standard approach to internal change, if possible, to hire an expert which can help them to be sensitive to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And at local level, I know that World Bank collaborates more with state, and I know that they cannot give money without conditionalities. Is it a way that they can include that if those states use money, if they can, when they follow up or evaluate, if they can see if refugee has been involved at the lower level with execution or implementation of the project. Refugee and refugee-led organization put in conditionality your request to states. Thank you.
Great point, Seconde. Great point. Anna Maria, do you have something to share with us regarding specific mechanism? And then we'll hear from Xavier, because we also have two attendees who have raised their hands for questions for a good time now.
I'd rather to take the time to answer some questions to make it more fluid.
Okay.
Thank you, Huri.
Thank you very much, Anna. Xavier, do you want to share something quickly?
I'm happy to respond after the other point, after the other interventions.
Okay, so now we have Sylvain Himbana from the attendees. She raised her hand for a question. Can you write it down, please? Oh, I see. Okay, I see it here. Because I see two people have raised their hand. If you can write the question, that would be perfect. But there is a question saying, when there is a significant xenophobia in the host society, both at the policy and community level, how is being addressed, how this is being addressed, and how you feel it can be effectively addressed with the meaningful refugee participation. So saying, because we have the xenophobia in both policy and community, how do you see this is being addressed right now, and how meaningful refugee participation could help? Anyone wants to talk to this question? Anna, yeah, go ahead, please.
I think that the Medellin city example is a very good one because, you know, the city hasn't overcome fully their economic and social issues, and they have over that a massive arrival of people in need. So I think that the basis of every single intervention has to be a fluid conversation. I know this can sound very dumb, but when people opens up to a frank conversation among everyone, the solutions came up very easily, and it's up to the policymakers to shape it around it of people's best interest. But it has to be a fluid conversation with equal representation and equal respect for everyone involved. I think that's the starting point.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. So yeah, like we cannot deny the fact that we have a high percentage of xenophobia in some communities and policy and community level, but also we see that sometimes policymakers and that the approach that policymakers take towards refugees and the way they deal with the refugee issues impact the community and how the community look at refugees. So if we can make sure that refugees are meaningfully included with the policymakers in a way that they see the benefits of having refugees in the policy conversation, and also try to tweak the way they deal or the way they talk about refugees and migration with the community. This also impacts how the community look at refugees and migrants. The second question we have is from Thomas. I think the issue of representation is an oversight issue limiting RLOs to get direct funding. Most refugee-led organizations are led by host nation's person. We can loom at that. Okay. I think what Thomas is trying to say is, so because the issue of the representation is limiting an RLOs to get direct funding, and because most of the refugee-led organizations are led by host nations person. I don't know if someone could talk about this question, but I'm not sure I have completely get the points of this question. I'm gonna move to the third question and then come back to this question. The third one is saying, can the World Bank also provide calls for a proposal that include refugee-led organizations? And this one, I will leave it to Xavier because you had something to say, and then we gonna go back just for a few minutes for Thomas' question. Xavier, can you talk about the third question?
Yeah, but if you allow me, I'd like to speak both as a person who's been working at the World Bank for a long time, but also as a friend. And I think friends try to be candid with friends. So let me just be very straightforward, right? Which is that the World Bank is an immense bureaucracy. Why? How could I put that? It's not going to change easily. And maybe it doesn't need to change. right? I mean, obviously, any bureaucracy can improve, so there's always a need for change. That's not what I'm trying to say, right? But for what we're talking today, maybe it does not need to change, right? I think the point is we do have fairly elaborate processes for consultation and participation in our work. And rather than, I think I would not be a good friend if I gave you the impression that we could actually design a new set of processes and procedures to engage with refugee-led organizations. Because this is not going to be very sustainable. If we consult with 98% of civil society in a certain way, and then we start developing something on the margin for the other 2%, chances are it's not going to, it's not going to be very sustainable. It's not going to last, right? And so I think my point is, let's start by looking at what the processes exist and how refugee-led organizations can actually participate through these processes, right? And if we see that there are shortfalls and difficulties and challenges and so on, then we can fix the shortfalls, the challenges, etc., right? But I think I would not necessarily start from, we have a certain way to engage with humanitarian organizations. Let's transpose this way to the World Bank, because it's, with all due respect, it's very unlikely to work, right? I would start from the World Bank as this way to engage with CSOs. How do we make sure that refugee-led organization can actually piggyback on these processes, right? And so it's a different way of thinking, but I think it is a very important differences if you want to be influential, because since there exist processes, people know how to deal with the outcomes of these conversations, etc., etc. If you try to bring a different humanitarian culture to the World Bank, maybe that's needed, but it's going to take far, far more time, far, far more effort. And in all the other change processes of the World Bank, etc., it may not be given, as much priority as all of us on this table would like. So I just wanted to really highlight this, which is, let's not reinvent the wheel. There's a wheel. Let's try to figure out how we can make it work for the ILOs, right? And as part of that, the question of call for proposals, why we don't work with call for proposals. I mean, that's just not the way we function, right? The way we function is through, dialogues with governments that are informed by what we hear from different actors, including civil society, including potentially refugee-led organizations. And then on that basis, we provide financing essentially through government channels, right? And so I think, once again, the difficulty in my mind for many organizations which have worked in a certain setting with certain type of actors is not necessarily to try to bring this culture to the World Bank, but rather try to look at what is the World Bank's culture, approach, processes, and so on, and how do you actually best be part of that, right? It's going to be much smoother.
Exactly. No, I totally get your point. As you said, this is not the World Bank, how the World Bank work, and we should have more conversation on how the World Bank have been approaching this with other groups. As you were saying, the wheel is already there. We don't have to invent the wheel, but we need to have more of a deeper conversation on what is the World Bank is doing and how can we really engage RLOs within somehow something that is already be working at the World Bank context. And this is why I think this conversation is just a start of a conversation on where we go into the details of what the World Bank is doing and how can we really make sure that RLOs are part of this process while not reinventing the wheel, as Xavier said, and start something from zero. We need to look at what has already been done, what is working in this context, and try to see how can we adapt to make sure that RLOs are engaged. I'm sorry, but we have went over time by 10 minutes. We cannot answer all these questions, but we promise to have more conversation at RI. This is just one event, but we promise to have more conversation around that in order to get to a point where we really know how we can engage refugee-led organization within the particularities of the World Bank. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who attended online. Sorry for not answering all the questions. Thank you very much, the panelists. This was a great conversation. We really appreciate your time you're taking to talk to us, and we promise more conversation to come. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Many, many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.